This doesn't light your fireman, the pilot lights out.
This football team is coming into our place. We're standing in our way.
This is a game of the heart. Focus and finish.
Welcome to Roto Experts coverage of the 2013 NFL season. We're going to take a look at tonight's matchup from a fantasy perspective. So let's get right to it. Peyton Manning struggled in his Week 15 regular season game against Baltimore last year, throwing for 204 yards and 1 TD. But he put up 290 yards and 3 TDs against them in Denver's playoff loss, though it came with 3 turnovers. Baltimore's defense has undergone a bunch of changes since last season, so it's tough to know what they'll throw at Manning this year. He'll likely see a better pass rush with former teammate Elvis Dumervil coming at him, but with Wes Welker now in tow, expect Manning to once again put up solid numbers. Speaking of Welker, he was limited to just one preseason game because of a tweaked ankle. He caught 3 passes for 31 yards and a score. Expect him to be Manning's favorite target, and he should be able to put up solid numbers regardless of the opponent. Start him in all formats, but give him a bump in value in PPR leagues. Fantasy owners seem worried about how targets will be distributed between Demaryius Thomas, Wes Welker, and Eric Decker. But regardless of who gets the most looks, Thomas has the most big play potential. The Ravens did a good job in limiting Thomas in both games last year, holding him to 50 yards and 1 TD, and cornerback Ladarius Webb, who missed both Denver games because of injury, will likely see a lot of Thomas in coverage this time. Won't be easy, but Thomas remains a must-start because of his upside. Eric Decker could be the odd man out among Denver's trio of pass catchers, but he also might benefit from seeing the softer coverage. Starting him is a bit of a gamble this week against the solid Baltimore defense, but his upside is greater than most wide receiver 3 options. The reward outweighs the risks with Decker. Julius Thomas is listed as the Broncos' #1 tight end on the depth chart, a distinction he earned in the preseason by catching 12 of 14 passes for 123 yards. It's tough to imagine Thomas getting a lot of targets with the other 3 receivers they have, but we know Manning likes to spread it around, and the athletic 6'5", 250-pound tight end may become a favorite target in the red zone. It's pretty risky to rely on him in Week 1, especially against a decent defense, but it's worth watching how Thomas is used going forward. Ronnie Hillman technically sits atop the Broncos' depth chart, but his preseason fumbling issues could cost him playing time. Also, the fact that he played in the 4th preseason game while both Noshawn Marino and Monte Ball didn't dress, that can't be a good sign. But Denver showed a commitment to the run in last year's playoff game against Baltimore, giving its running backs 40 carries, including 22 for Hillman after Marino got hurt. But there's just too much uncertainty surrounding Denver's running back situation to trust Hillman, especially after his preseason struggles. Monte Ball was all the rage after the NFL draft, but his failure to seize the starting job in the preseason disappointed many. However, there's still a good chance that he'll lead the Broncos in carries tonight. It just doesn't seem like to completely trust Hillman. Like Hillman though, there's just too much uncertainty here to trust Ball as anything more than a flex in standard leagues, and even that comes with risks. Noshawn Marino figures to be Denver's primary 3rd down back, which could result in a fair amount of receptions, maybe even enough to make him a flex in PPR leagues, but standard leaguers shouldn't risk starting Marino this week. You need to see him get regular playing time and prove he's 100% after offseason knee surgery. The Broncos' defense isn't the same unit that finished number 3 in the fantasy rankings last season. Their pass rush is severely depleted without Dumervil and Miller, and they have injuries to the 2nd level with linebacker Stuart Bradley's wrist and on the 3rd level with Champ Bailey's foot. Even though Baltimore lost some key pieces on offense, this matchup isn't favorable for the Broncos. They're not awful, but there are likely better options on your waiver wire. Joe Flacco put up some big numbers against the Broncos last year, throwing for 585 yards and 5 TDs in 2 games. He was able to repeatedly beat them over the top in their playoff matchup. And with no Elvis Dumervil or Von Miller rushing him, should have more time in the pocket and more open receivers downfield. Now Flacco's often inconsistent with his throws, but he only needs to hit a couple of deep balls to have fantasy success. He can function as a quarterback 1 this week if you need him. Ray Rice was shut down by the Broncos in Week 15 last year, rushing just 12 times for 38 yards. But when the Ravens leaned on him in their double overtime playoff win, he came through, gaining 131 yards on 30 carries. He should get plenty of touches this week as Baltimore tries to find its offensive rhythm after losing Anquan Boldin to free agency and Dennis Pitta to a hip injury in the same offseason. Rice is a safe running back one. Torrey Smith routinely beat the Broncos deep in the playoffs and would have done even better than his 6-catch, 98-yard, 2 TD performance if Joe Flacco hadn't missed him a few times. And with Boldin gone, Smith should see more targets this year. And Flacco should have more time hanging in the pocket and wait for him to get open. Even if Champ Bailey plays, Smith has the potential to be a wide receiver one this week. Bernard Pierce had a quiet preseason, essentially putting to rest the idea that he would steal more carries from Rice this season, at least early on. While the second-year back has plenty of talent and upside, he'll need to make a big play with one of his limited touches to have a fantasy impact. He's not worth the risk in Week 1. Ed Dixon is ahead of Dallas Clark on the depth chart, but Clark's ability to work the seam will probably earn him more targets against the Broncos defense that had trouble containing tight ends all last year. Both players are risky in standard leagues, but if you're taking a flyer, I actually think Clark has a better shot at paying off. Baltimore's defense may have undergone the biggest overhaul of any team this season. Even though they lost several key players like Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, Donnell Ellerbe, Paul Kruger, Bernard Pollard, they added some big names like Elmer Dumerville, Chris Canty, Michael Huff. Denver is one of the toughest matchups for any defense, especially at home, so you should look for a better option this week, but Baltimore should be fine in most matchups. So this is it. The NFL season starts tonight. Your fantasy season starts tonight. All the build-up, the anticipation, the hype, it's here, it's now. Be sure to tune into the Roto Experts Fantasy Football News Notes and Analysis segment every weekday. I'll be here to keep you current and ahead of the competition, and on weekdays, come back for This Week in Fantasy Football as I team up with the King, Scott Engel, covering the week that was and the week that will be, answering your viewer questions. For Roto Experts, I'm Mike Cardano. See you tomorrow.